many of the same accusations that Kelly was manipulative, controlling, and he also leveraged his superstar status to take advantage of those hoping to make it big in the music industry. However, this time, one of those accounts came from a man.
Day 8, August 30th, 2021. John Doe testified about being lured to Kelly's home in 2007 with false offers of success in the music business. The witness said he was 17 years old when Kelly performed oral sex on him. Another time, a naked girl appeared from under a boxing ring when summoned by the snap of Kelly's fingers. She then performed oral sex on Kelly and the witness. The defendant told the high schooler to keep the encounters just between me and him, John Doe testified.
In the introduction, when they were talking about the victims that were testifying being scared and ashamed. And this is something that's common when we have sexual assault cases, especially when you have young people that have been sexually abused. There's this whole element, and with Lewis, where we're talking about homosexual behavior that doesn't necessarily mean that either party is actually a homosexual, but they've engaged in this behavior. Sexual assault like this is typically about power and control. And hopefully they're going to have a psychologist on at some point to explain all of that to the jury that may be confused as to why R. Kelly was acting in the way that he did. But when we have victims like this that are testifying, there's all of these other things that they bring into the courtroom while they're testifying, including an embarrassment or being afraid about talking about acts that they may have engaged in that were homosexual, that were forced upon them, or that they didn't stop or deny. And that includes behavior that may be inappropriate, like drinking or using drugs. And oftentimes this is part of what people will do that are predators to try and cover up their actions and make it fearful for their victims to come forward. Things like implied consent because they didn't testify or protest or tell their parents or authorities when it happened. And these are some of the justifications as to why you see testimony so many years later. And that's all of what I was thinking about while I was listening and hearing what Lewis was saying when he was talking about the behavior in answer to the unasked questions from the audiences and jury as to why he didn't stop it, why he didn't say something earlier. That's part of the cycle of abuse that a predator builds in cases like this. And the takeaway from that is that Lewis's testimony, in addition to the other victim, is again showing consistencies about R. Kelly as a predator, showing consistencies as to his behavior for being behind, orchestrating, and ultimately benefiting from the sexual abuse that he was setting up for many of these young victims that we're hearing from over and over and over again, Yadid.
Day 9, August 31st, 2021. Another Jane Doe, uncharged acts, testified about a more recent encounter with Kelly after a 2017 San Antonio concert. The self-described initial non-fan testified she met Kelly at age 19 with her older sister. The two were still high school students when Kelly paid for their flights, hotel room, and concerts in various cities. During the brief relationship, Jane Doe said Kelly demanded sex and exposed her to an STD without her knowledge. Day 10, September 1st, 2021. Jane Doe number 6 testified Kelly sometimes kept a gun by his side, adding to her fear of disobeying his commands. She described an abusive sexual relationship that began when she was 19 and ended in a New York hotel suite with a herpes diagnosis.
Well, again, the fact that she's corroborating the previous testimony from other witnesses that we've seen and other victims that we've heard on the stand is what stands out. And we keep getting more and more of these victims taking the stand with similar stories that corroborate abusive behavior and assaultive, controlling rules. Those are two elements that are going to be woven throughout all of the evidence that we're hearing, because those are all of the evidence pathways that are building upon from the prosecution, showing that R.KELLY, was in control, that he was the predator that orchestrated how these girls, how these young women, and how these young men were marched along in a very organized fashion that led to their assaults and misuse by him. That's why this testimony is so important, and we're going to keep hearing more of it. It feels like another victim and another victim and another victim, but these instances and these narratives are making the stories very credible for the jury that's listening to them, with story after story, and with the information that's also being presented to them about being exposed to these SDTs. And that undermines challenges that could come from the defense that this was all willing, that they were acting independently, or they wanted to be exposed in that way in a sexual manner. And that's before we even get to their age and the power differential. So that's what stood out to me. And I expected this testimony, and I expect to hear a little bit more of it before we drift away into some of the other evidence that the prosecution is going to put on, likely with psychologists and likely with the folks around R.KELLY that helped him orchestrate his criminal behavior.
Jane Doe number 6 is an accuser who sued the defendant the following year, in 2018, for violating public health laws. Prosecutors also called to the stand the pastor who married Kelly and Aaliyah in 1994, Nathan Edmonds. Said he didn't know the couple was anyone special, and he performed the 10-minute ceremony as a favor to a friend, Keith Williams, who previously testified. Edmonds said he was shown a marriage license with Aaliyah, listed as 18. Day 11, September 2nd, 2021. A 31-year-old woman testified for the prosecution, but revealed she didn't want to be on the stand and balked at nailing down exactly when in her teens Kelly began having sex with her. She was 15 in 2006 when the relationship with the singer began, one filled with backstage passes, free flights, and hotels. She described having threesomes with Kelly and his girlfriend after Kelly had her wear lingerie. She was instructed to walk the girlfriend, who was on her hands and knees wearing a leash and collar. The defense declined to cross-examine this witness at all. Day 12, September 3rd, 2021. Jurors heard about a $200,000 civil settlement one of Kelly's accusers received after allegations he gave her herpes in 2001. Jane Doe, uncharged acts, testified she was 27 when she met Kelly and asked him to use protection when they first started having sex, citing her fear of AIDS and STDs, but he declined. Wrapping up week 4, day 13, September 8, 2021. Jane Doe number 3. A radio station intern in 2003 details a horrific account of being trapped in a dark room for days, resulting in the kidnapping charge against Kelly. She alleges he violated her while she was drugged and unconscious. She met him at the age of 21 in Salt Lake City when she approached his entourage about an interview. She accepted an offer to be flown out to Chicago, and while waiting at his studio in a windowless room, she found it was locked from the outside. After banging on the door, she was told she couldn't leave without permission from Kelly. After 2 days passed, she was given Chinese food and soda. She testified she passed out on the couch and awoke to find someone had taken her clothes off and felt wet stuff between her legs. Kelly was in the room pulling up his pants, according to Jane Doe.
Let's talk more about what the male accuser said on the stand. He testified that Kelly asked him what he was willing to do to advance his music career. Now, many of these accusers have accounts that start with their career aspirations. This plays right into the prosecution's theory, right, that Kelly used his fame to prey on these individuals, especially those who wanted a music career. But could that also give the defense an open to discredit their accounts?
Well, only if they're able to show that Lewis and these other victims were acting as fans and independently, and that they wanted to do these things versus R. Kelly forcing them to do those things. And let me qualify that by saying, even if they did, it's still statutory rape. It's still illegal behavior because of the age. But I think what they're laying a foundation for to make an argument about is challenging the power differential based on the authority of a celebrity trying to influence someone's career, and even the age differential of trying to influence someone who is so much younger than you. Their real only pathway is to try and identify all of these victims as fans and not victims. Even if they did, it's still statutory rape. It's still illegal behavior. It's still illegal behavior. It's still illegal behavior. It's still illegal behavior.